So, after Jerry Seinfeld's comments about how political correctness or wokeness or the left have killed comedy, it would be easy to sit here and point out the hypocrisy of him saying that the same week as his new film, A Comedy, drops on Netflix. It would be tempting to crow about how that film, Unfrosted, is not all that funny and how that does not seem to be the fault of the left or the woke or the PC or anyone other than Seinfeld himself, its director and star, and his team of co-writers. Yes, it would be easy and tempting and, in all honesty, immensely satisfying to do that. But I don't know. The truth is, I didn't find Unfrosted to be all that funny. It got a few laughs out of me here and there, but overall, And yet, I can't honestly tell you that I didn't like it. I didn't love it, but I found it watchable. Unfrosted is an absurdist, cartoonish, highly fictionalized telling of the origins of the Pop-Tart, that beloved toaster pastry we all grew up with, except those of you watching this who are, like, super old. And hey, to you, my elders, respect. Unless you voted Republican. Seinfeld stars as Bob Cabana, an executive for the Kellogg's Company in the early 1960s who leads the team of developers who eventually create the Pop-Tart. Seinfeld surrounds himself with a truly impressive all-star team of a supporting cast, most prominently Melissa McCarthy and Jim Gaffigan, along with Amy Schumer, Hugh Grant, and a nearly endless parade of recognizable faces who appear in only a handful of scenes each, many portraying caricatures of actual people, among them James Marsden as Jack LaLanne, Thomas Lennon as Sea Monkey's inventor Harold von Braunhut, Bobby Moynihan as Chef Boyardee, Kyle Dunnigan as Walter Cronkite, and Bill Burr as President John F. Kennedy. They all have their opportunities to shine, and many of them are very funny, especially Burr as a prickly and impatient Kennedy, and Dunnigan, whose Cronkite has a habit of muttering bitterly about his troubled marriage while playing with era-appropriate toys during commercial breaks on his newscast. It's a running gag that is one of my favorite bits in the movie. There are also some ringers brought in to play purely fictional characters. My favorites are two child actors, Bailey Sheets and Eleanor Sweeney, who play Butchie and Kathy, a pair of dumpster-diving kids who become unofficial product testers for Cabana and his team, and who get some of the biggest laughs of the movie. Among the adults, the two funniest are Christian Slater as a menacing milkman and Peter Dinklage as his boss in a mafia-like milk delivery syndicate who strongly opposes the effort to develop Pop-Tarts because, unlike cereal, Pop-Tarts don't need milk. That's a clever idea right there. The milkmen are against Kellogg's making Pop-Tarts because it threatens to cut in on their business. Unfrosted has lots of clever ideas, presenting the development of the Pop-Tart as an arms race, with Kellogg's opposed by rival cereal company Post, which is creating its own breakfast toaster pastry, structuring the plot of the film to be a loose spoof of The Right Stuff, complete with several direct visual references and an Apollo 1 joke almost dark enough for me to have told it on an episode of the Late Seating podcast, reimagining the Cuban Missile Crisis as a conflict over the import of sugar rather than the placement of nuclear arms. And I could go on, but the problem with Unfrosted is, with only a few exceptions, Seinfeld and his writers can't seem to think of anything to do with their clever ideas after they introduce them to us. Shaping the origin story of Pop-Tarts as a riff on The Right Stuff is a funny concept, but a funny concept is mostly all it is. Instead of finding more inventive places to go with their funny concepts, it feels like the writers spent most of their time crafting a plot that is way too complicated for material as silly as this. There is so much going on in this movie, and the longer it goes, the more complicated it gets. There's the toaster pastry arms race, there's the milkman mafia, there's the sugar-based international intrigue, there's a labor dispute between Kellogg's and its cereal mascots led by Tony the Tiger. I feel like Seinfeld was attempting to do a goofier feature-length version of what he and Larry David and their writers were able to do in many a classic episode of Seinfeld, the sitcom, and tell a farcical story with multiple parallel threads that meet at the end. And in a sense, they succeed. That is what happens in Unfrosted. It's just not as funny as it feels like it should be. It's like an episode from one of the later seasons of Seinfeld, when the show was well off its creative peak, not a classic like The Contest or The Parking Garage from when the show was in its prime and firing on all cylinders. Unfair though they may be, comparisons to Seinfeld, the show, are difficult to avoid given the fact that Seinfeld, the person, is the creator of Unfrosted. But unfair or not, Seinfeld's comedy pedigree does render some of Unfrosted's more glaring missteps all the more perplexing. For example, more than once, the film sets up a solid joke only to spoil it by smothering the punchline, or by having a character comment on what's happening to lampshade the silliness. Sometimes this works to the film's benefit, like when Seinfeld, as Cabana, looks at the team he's assembled, which includes Jack LaLanne, Steve Schwinn, as in Schwinn Bicycles, and the inventor of sea monkeys, and remarks to his partner, "Do you think we should have gotten more people with food experience?" But mostly it only serves to stick a needle in the absurdity that makes the whole thing work. When it works. There's an inspired bit involving a funeral where the deceased is given full cereal honors, which involves a costumed mascot color guard filling the grave with cereal and milk to the point that the coffin begins to float, and a gigantic cereal box prize package being folded like a flag and presented to the widow. It's really funny, but it would be funnier if the widow wasn't so aware of how strange it all is. It's not the sort of bit that needs a normal person in there to point out all the weird stuff. Some jokes, most jokes I'd argue, are better if you just let them speak for themselves. Despite his whining of late about how much harder it is to do comedy these days thanks to how sensitive and woke everybody is, which is disappointing but not terribly surprising, Jerry Seinfeld is, or at least has been, a very funny guy. He knows how to write a joke. He knows how to get a laugh. That being the case, it's a little surprising that the weakest component of Unfrosted is the jokes. It has its moments. It's not terrible. It's got an incredible cast. It looks great. It has a lot of fun with its setting. It's a period piece that is extremely flexible with its temporal setting. The story is established as taking place in 1963, but treats events that happened well before and after that point as contemporaneous, essentially setting the film in an amalgam of the entire decade of the 60s, which I liked. It adds to the absurdity of the whole thing. There's a lot about the movie I like, but ultimately, I found it underwhelming, and that boils down to there being too much plot and too few laughs. Though I find his recent complaints about the extreme left killing comedy to be tiresome, Seinfeld has the right to think and say whatever he wants. But if he expects his opinion on this matter to be taken seriously, the next time Netflix or any other studio gives him $14 million to do whatever he wants, it would really help his case if he came up with something funnier than this.